May I have a mover and seconder to call the meeting to order, please? I have Councilors Garwood and Alexander that the special meeting of the Council of the Township of Springwater of January 17th, 2024 come to order at 5 p.m. All those in favor? And that has carried. Councilor, are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? And not seeing any, I will now call upon Michael Navarra of Thurber Engineering Limited for a presentation regarding the roads needs study. May I have a mover and seconder? I have Councilor Moore and Councilor Fisher, and we can begin the presentation.
Gonna be different sitting. So thank you very much. So this year we were retained by the Township of Springwater to carry out the 2023 roads needs study. So I'll just jump right in. The presentation is outlined as follows. We'll be getting into, next slide, please, sorry. So we'll talk about the project objectives briefly, and then I will go through the data collection techniques that we used, the methodology that was used for this particular collection, as it did differ from the previous one, the data analysis that followed, as well as reviews that carried on, and then finish with the capital planning scenarios that we presented as options. Next slide, please. Next two slides, I guess. There we go. So from the RFP, the objective of this study was to come up with a comprehensive report that will assess all of the roads within Springwater owned by Springwater, so that we could prove a proper capital planning scenario for you that would meet your budgeting and your funding scenarios and available. We needed to come up with an objective way to do it, which was also presented in the RFP. For this one, I'll get into the methodology that was used. There's different methodologies that could be used for assessing all of the roads. I'll walk you through what we did, and it's pretty straightforward. For the record, I will go through this as if you know nothing. It's just easier for me to present that way. So if it is very base for you, I apologize, but it's just a lot easier to assume everybody is at the same level. We went through the development of an updated inventory. So that took a bit of work at the front end just to make sure the database was correct and erroneous data was taken care of. And then we came up with what I would call not necessarily a prioritized, but an optimized scenario list of roads that we presented to you for repair, that you can then select which scenario you'd like to do. Each scenario is slightly different, and we'll talk through the funding requirements versus the deficit that follows each of those scenarios. Next slide, please. Next two slides. Okay, so yeah, that's perfect. So this was our collection vehicle. So we send out two persons, one of which is a pavement engineer when we carry out these assessments. The objective is to drive every road, every kilometer of road, and visually assess them by eye. For this particular assignment, we also took photographs. So this is an example you can kind of see in the middle, and then the upper corner. We had two cameras on our vehicles. I think for this one, we only did one camera. We didn't need to do any rear facing photos, but this is what we would do if we did front and rear. So one of the objectives was to photograph every 5 meters, every road within the Township of Springwater, which we did. We still have to discuss about how we're going to transfer those files to you, but Dan and I are still going through that. In addition to this, what we would do is, next slide, please. I'll just show you some of the imagery. So these are some of the quality of the imagery. They are GPS enabled GoPros that are being used for this assignment. And again, for every 5 to 10 meter intervals, it's a lot of imagery, quite frankly. But the resolution is quite good. If you can just flip through the slides there, Jen, please. Okay, right there. That's good to stop. So in addition to the photos, some of the other technology that we used was this handheld, was an app that you put on your phone. And so what this app does is it takes the accelerometer in your phone and it will measure the roughness of your road. So as you're driving around, the phone will be vibrating slightly. And it's measuring how rough or smooth the roads actually are. So what that is generating is what we call a ride condition index. Okay, so alternative to this would be, and this was a requirement of this project as well. Alternative to this would be the raters in the vehicle would assign a value from 1 to 10. based on how they feel the road is as they're driving along. Quite frankly, we do that as well because we don't always trust what the data is given to us. So part of our QC checks is to compare what we actually feel. We've done enough roads. We have a pretty good assessment of how our body shakes during the car. But we do go back also because sometimes the data that we collect doesn't always come through. There's always going to be some error that could happen. So it's one of our QC checks that we rate the roads by eye, and we also we when we're doing the assessment of the roughness, we also rate them manually as well. So these parameters, the roughness and the distresses that we are observing in the road, are used to calculate what's called a PCI. So I'll just go through. So just for the record, this is for our setup that we use. This is a Samsung phone that we've got a specific mount that we mount to the window, to the windshield, so we can see everything that's going on at the same time. Next slide, please. Again, this is pretty quick. So on the left-hand side, you'll see the manuals or guides that we followed. So for all asphalt roads, we referred to ASTM per the RFP specifications. However, ASTM doesn't cover gravel or surface treated roads. So for those roads, we use the MTO manuals. MTO does have a manual also for asphalt roads, but again, for this particular assessment, we used ASTM. Regardless of the method used, when you look at the center, the asphalt pavement, or even for the gravel or surface treated, what we're assessing for is the type of distress that we see in the road or deterioration. So cracking, how bad is it? Moderate, severe, low, or high. The density of it, which means how much of it do we see. And with the ASTM method, it's a bit more cumbersome because we not only assess the type of distress that we see and the severity of it, so how bad it is, but also we quantify how much we see. And again, it's more of a manual calculation. MTO's method doesn't necessarily do that method. It just says, okay, is it 15 to 20% of the road experiencing this, or more than 50%? It's a little bit easier to do. But the end result is generally the same. On the right-hand side, the equipment that we used, I showed you some of it. So that app on the previous slide, that's the Rubix app. So Rubix is a app produced by a company called Rival Solutions. I'll get into them a bit more later on. Phone cameras, typically we're using any tablet phone camera or even a laptop, depending on what we're doing. Nothing is, in the past, we used to do these by hand, and we would actually write thousands of sheets out, and then somebody would have to type them all up later. So for transcription errors, we have decided to go right to an electronic format of collecting the data. Next slide, please. So these are the sheets that we collect. Again, these are the MTO forms. The ASTM forms aren't very nice to show. These are a bit more clear. The premise is the same. So basically all the types of distresses are listed, whether they're slight, moderate, or severe, and the extent. So how much of the distress did we see? So whether it's ASTM or MTO, the methodology is generally the same. The output is the same. So if you look on the sort of in the lower, where it says PCI, that's the calculation output. So we're going to talk a lot about PCI, which is Pavement Condition Index. So don't worry about it right now. Park that, and then we'll come back to it. And then the next two slides, you can, Jen, please just push through, and you can skip that one. That's for gravel and surface treated roads. They're generally the same. I just wanted to post them up there so you'd have them. Next slide, please. So once the data comes in, so our assessors in the field bring the data back into the office, then we go through a gap analysis and make sure no data was missing, or if there's any erroneous data. Typically we like to refer to the previous study and see, did a road that was once assessed as a PCI of 100, which is perfect, drop to a 50, which would be basically catastrophic in 3 years. So I personally go through the data, or another engineer, and will actually do a 10% drive of the entire road network again, just to check the data to see if I'm seeing what I'm seeing. And I'm going to get into what these numbers mean a bit more, so this will be a bit more clear. The other thing that we did, and we spent a lot of time doing, is the GIS shapefile. The shapefile, when we first got it, it wasn't bad, but there was duplicate data, which could pose problems when we're generating capital plans, because you may have two roads in there that get hit twice. So the capital plan's not even. So we spent a lot of time cleaning up that data. When we're doing the road analysis, typically with GIS, It's a road from and to. So it's typically intersection to intersection, generally. But sometimes there's overlapping, as you can imagine. We don't always pave intersection to intersection. We may pave 400 meters past the intersection. So we have to double check that those variables are getting calculated and carried as well. And then following that, what we do, and Dan and I did this together, is we establish some performance targets. There's general performance targets that we use in industry. However, each municipality is able to do what they want, and they have some standard ones that they use. So that's what we did. Next slide, please, Jen. So performance targets are essentially what type of treatment are we going to introduce at what time? Okay, so keep that in your mind for now, and I'm just going to focus on the right-hand side of the presentation for now. So PCI, again, pavement condition index, is a rating from 0 to 100. It's pretty straightforward, and this is global. So anywhere you go in basically North America and parts of Europe as well, they use a very similar scale. The scale you see on the screen is the ASTM scale. MTO has a similar scale. It doesn't have the same PCI categories. So for instance, it doesn't have a 0 to 10 failed category. They kind of group a few things together, but that's okay. This is fine. So what's important here is to understand when we are interjecting in the pavements. So you can see that any roads that have a PCI rating of 71 to 100 are good or satisfactory. Those are our preventative maintenance treatments. So preventative maintenance is essentially things like crack sealing, pothole fixing, maybe microsurfacing, just on HMA roads, or maybe you're just scarifying gravel roads. So we have a specific set of criteria we're going to fit into that category. Then we get into the rehabilitation category, which is the poor and the poor and the fair. So 41 PCI to 70. We have another set of treatments, and you can see on the left on that curve, rehabilitation treatments could be micro slurry seals, microsurfacing. They could be one lift, mill and overlay, which is every municipality does it. So mill, shave and pave, however you want to call it. So that would fit into that category. And then lastly, we have reconstruction. So basically anything that is in the very poor to failed condition, those are the roads that are going to fall into the reconstruction category. And reconstruction, basically think of reconstruction as anytime we need to remove the asphalt and the underlying granular materials and build it back up. Okay, if you're just taking off asphalt and putting it back, we're rehab. So that's kind of, if you want, a barometer of where we should be. But for the record, the graph on the left, that's just a generic PCI graph. So it just shows that if we started at the left at 100% of your road, so brand new road, over time it's going to deteriorate. No two roads deteriorate the same. It doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter the type of mix. It matters. There's a lot of factors that go in. This is a very important slide because your road network, as I will show you in the coming slides, is actually in satisfactory condition. That's their term. I would say it's in good condition. Okay, so we'll get there, but we'll have to talk through that. And this is I'll carry these slides through so you understand. We're always going back to the same slide, but this treatment category, you'll see why it's important or when we interject. The reason we want the historical way of thinking when it comes to roads is do your assessment of the roads, rank every road from 0 to 100, develop a PCI, turn that scale upside down and fix all of your bad roads first. There is plenty of documented proof that says that is not the right do. You've probably heard it called worst first. That is not the way we spend money. It's not the right way to do it. You will let your other roads go and then you'll end up with a major deficit. That is not what we did here. So when we talk about optimization and the capital planning tool that was used, we optimized it. We did not do that. Okay, so yes, there are going to be roads that are very bad that need to be done, but what we want to do is also keep fixing your good roads. So we want to put emphasis on crack sealing. We want to put emphasis on using preventative maintenance methods like slurry seals or microsurfacing. Okay, so some of this might be new to the township as well, because it's important to start to looking at these other options. Okay, it'll also spread your money a lot further. The good news is about Springwater is you are located very well within the range of all these types of services. So there's nothing here that some of the very remote communities, they don't have that option. They just don't have contractors that can come out and do this type of work. This is not the case for Springwater. So this is the good news. Okay, next slide, please. So Rubik's, again, Rival Solutions, we've partnered with on this. They're one of our two sub vendors that we used. Rubik's is the name of the software. And again, for this assessment, what they did for us was their app was able to, we could store all of the photos that we took georeferenced into their app. So they're currently on the web, and they're available. And they also calculated, it's in the second bullet down, the road roughness, international roughness index. So we did calculate, I mentioned road condition index or rough ride condition index. IRI and RCI are very similar. Okay, there's specific formulas that are used to relate them back to PCI. So essentially, to make it very simple, the DMI, the distress manifestation index, is how bad your roads are in terms of visual distresses that we see. So how much cracking we see, the type of cracking we see, the type of raveling, rutting, etc. We take that and we assign that a number. Then we take the IRI and we assign a number to it. That's how rough your roads are. So as you're driving your roads, how bumpy or smooth are they? We take those two values and we plug them into a formula and we generate the PCI. Okay, so it's not the old way of doing it, again, is very subjective. It's me driving your roads and saying, this is a 72, this is a 50, this is a 49. This is more of a calculated method so that it's reproducible. Okay. And what we want to make sure is now all of us could go out on the road and we could all assess it and we may all come up with something slightly different for the distresses, and that's fine. I calibrated our raters based on all of my experience, and our raters, I've worked with them for years. So we're very in tune with what we do. Closer than I actually thought. It's actually a little scary. Next slide, please. So your network. Yeah, okay, perfect. So I've tried to put the rating scale on the left just as a reminder throughout, because I know it's maybe the first time for some of you that have seen it. These are just some images that we pulled from the software that we're using. So basically, that's the Springwater network. And again, this is a web-based app. Another vendor that we're using, we plug all of the PCIs into their software, and that's the capital planning tool that we use. So this is actually from their app. They just took a screenshot of it. So basically all of the green roads, and I would say, yellow and green, those are your fair to good roads. So you can see just visually, the network's in pretty good shape. Okay, overall. Yes, there's going to be red roads, and that's fine. Elmvale's pretty green, but you can see it's got a good it's got a variability between, well, there's one failed road, but again, it's the top of my head, I can't remember the name of it, but I remember seeing a lot. And then we go down to Midhurst, and it's actually, there's a lot more red in Midhurst. Okay, so this is typical of any municipality. You're going to have, but it also can show you just visually where, if you didn't want to look at this capital planning, you could see where could we spread it around. But again, if we went with the old method of doing it, we would just now take all the red roads or purple roads and say, okay, fix all those. But what's going to happen if you do that is all your other roads that are in the light green or the yellow are then just going to drop to red. You're going to end up in a very bad place spending your money. So this is a screenshot of DOT. So DOT is Decision Optimization Technology, and this is from a company called Infrastructure Solutions, Inc. If any of you have ever been to, well, it used to be Ogra Roma, they used to have a booth set up. It's actually where I met them when I was with my old company. I've used them for 8 years now, and I think they have really taken off. This company has done, oh, next slide, please. Sorry, Jen. I'll apologize. Yeah, there it is there. This is from their web-based app, and this is the dashboard that we see when we first come on. So your network overall on the top left, and I think I have these zoomed in per slide, but we'll go through them quickly. Your overall network from a PCI rating out of 100 is 72. That's what I was saying. It's 72. It's called satisfactory, but really that's a good network. Okay, so if you're at a 72, you're in a good place right now. If you're in a 50, you're in a there's a lot more spend that needs to be taken care of. So as we go through, let me just see. Yeah. So Jen, if we could just go next slide, I'll just kind of zoom in. So this is just a pie chart of the network condition. So you can just see that, and this is based on kilometers of road, not number of road segments. I should be clear about that. So you could see there's one sliver of failed road. It's a very small amount. But predominantly there's about 63% of your roads are in the fair to good category. Okay. So part of this is going to be understanding how we take care of those roads moving forward. Next slide, please, Jen. I'll just go through these kind of quick, just so you can kind of see. This is a bar chart, just another way to look at it, of the functional class. So functional class being per the township official plan, we have local roads, collector roads, and minor arterial roads. Okay. Again, there could be more in depending on the municipality you're in. These are specific to the township. And so what you can see on the left is your local roads are the first bar chart. You can see about, say, 70-ish% are, or maybe more, 75% are fair to good. Okay, so your local roads are your residential streets, if you will. And then your collector roads are all your connecting streets. And actually in the township's official plan, they're very specific to which roads these actually are. You could see there's a greater amount of roads that are, in the poor to failed condition or poor to serious condition. And then the arterial roads are about, almost 50-50. So what's unique about the software is, again, with a worst first approach, you would just rate your roads PCI 0 to 100, fix the worst ones. What we can do in the software is we can say, well, okay, you know what? Our arterial roads are our money-making roads. Those are our major routes that are being traveled by, industry and people moving place to place, in and out of the township. We want to put slightly more weight towards those roads. And then you can assign, like, say 55%, then 50%, 40%. You can put the weighting differently for each type of functional class. And this is going to be the story. Next slide, please, Jen, as we go through. So for surface type, same thing. You predominantly have hot mix and surface treated roads. There's some gravel roads. They were typically in good condition. I don't know. This is the uniqueness of the condition assessment. Depending on when we go out to do the condition assessment, you may have just graded all of your gravel roads, so they may come out, and that's fine. It's gravel roads. We know they're part of a regular plan every year, but this is why the gravel roads are in great shape, and actually that helped drive your network up because I think they rated out at about 96 PCI on average. But your asphalt roads, they're pretty good too, so that's good. Like, I mean, your surface treating your asphalt roads are from good to fair, well above 50%. And again, this is why your overall network condition is a 72. That's satisfactory. Next slide, please. So I've talked a lot about this PCI, so I just wanted to outline, what does this look like? Okay. And I promise you, I did not pick these roads for any particular reason other than so if anybody knows these roads, I'm sure you do. I'm not picking on them. They just happen to be the ones that I came across that had images that I could show. So in the image on the left, you can see you can see the crown of the road, which is basically the shape of the road, is pretty good. There's a center and it looks like everything drains to the left and the right away from the crown. And all you can kind of see is little pock marks in the road. So that would be considered low severity raveling. Okay, so it's just things that are coming out. But if you drove the road and you with your eyes closed, which you shouldn't do, you wouldn't feel anything. It would feel very smooth, right? So your IRI would be very good. Okay, your roughness of the road. So because the IRI is good and there's only these, I don't see any cracking in the road. It looks like a crack. It's actually just a reflection from the street pole. This road rated very good, so it came out at a between 85 and 100. So this is a good road. Okay. So let's get down to the next category. So this is the satisfactory condition, still in a good condition. I apologize for the imagery. It's a bit, I guess the lights are making it a little dim. This road it's hard to see. You can see, obviously you can see the crack down the middle of the road. That's not been sealed. There's another transverse crack that goes across the road from pavement edge to pavement edge. But there's not a lot. You don't see the transverse cracks regularly. If you start to see them regularly, then the extent of the distress goes up. In this case, it's not too bad. And what you can't see, and this is where it gets a little blurry, is the road's pretty rough. So it is raveled, but probably moderate to low. So in essence, you'd still drive this road and it might sound a little bumpy, but it's still pretty smooth. Okay. So this road is probably, I think this was about 73. Yeah. So I was going to say it's on the lower end of the scale, but it's almost into the fair category. So this is what's going on as we're going out, we're looking at these roads. And again, I'm giving you a snapshot. The one thing I want to point out is it's not this particular spot on the road that dictates it. It's the full length of the road. So we obviously saw similar types of distresses throughout the length of the road. And again, why you're just, this is a great picture because why your road network is in good shape, and it's hard to see in the image there, but if you've got it on your laptops, if you look at the ditch on the right, that's a good ditch. Okay, ditches should be away from the road. They should be deep enough below the subgrade, and they should be taking water away from the road. Water is the #1 killer for roads. And so in this case, this is what I was noticing is that your overall drainage network was pretty good. Next slide, please, Jen. Yes, we're under Rosewood. Okay. So now we're getting into the fair category. Again, now you can start to see there was some manual patching down the middle. That cracking down the middle. So how this started was there was a center line crack, which was probably just from a paving joint, and water got in, softened up the material below, and then all of these little cracks start to interconnect. That's why you start to see all those, what we call alligator cracking down the middle. It's not progressed yet so far that it's in a severe category, but it's worth noting. And why this is a fair, this might have been one location on this stretch of road, but we have to count it. So overall, the road is maybe not bad, but we have to discount it because of it. So again, looking at the road, this is what you get. Again, ditch is good off to the side, drainage is good, but that paving joint is what failed this road. So that's a 58, right? Okay, next slide, please, Jen. And again, this is where it starts. Oh, you can kind of see. Okay, so this road, so no manual patching, but again, similar thing. You had a transverse crack. Transverse goes across the road from edge to edge, and longitudinal goes parallel to the road down the middle. You can see both types of cracking, and then what happens is as water gets in, softens the material below, cars drive on it, push it down, and it fails the asphalt on top. So this is a typical type of distress that we would see. And again, this road, so again, similar to the last picture, but what I would say to this road is this was seen more prevalently along this road. It wasn't just a snapshot of one spot. This probably happened throughout the length of the road. Okay, that's why this one dropped down to the category below. Next slide, please, Jen. I think I might have finished on this one. Yeah, failed. Scarlet. So this road, this is alligator cracking throughout. Again, we can get into the details of why roads fail this way, but you can notice, if you notice the sides of the road again, now you'll start to see a bit of a berm on the right-hand side of the screen. So water's not getting out. Water's likely staying in the road, and it's subjecting the road to a lot of moist and wet conditions. The asphalt may be too thin. There's a lot of reasons why this could have happened. But this, when I noticed when I was flipping through the pictures, this was prevalent throughout the length of this particular road. The one thing I would say about the MTO method versus the ASTM method is because ASTM is a calculated method, so our raters are actually assessing and quantifying the amount of distress, whereas MTO is more, so in MTO world, if the road has a distress such as this, and it's just greater than 50%, it's treated the same as a road that is like 95 to 100% of the same distress. ASTM, it's quantified. So because it's quantified, we get lower ratings. And I'm saying that because I don't think I've ever rated a road a 5. To me, that's almost impassable. But that's the ASTM method. That's how it comes out. Okay, so your road is still drivable. It's just pretty bumpy, and it's probably falling apart.
Just out of curiosity, is that ours or Oro's? That's ours. Sorry.
Well, that's from Moonstone to Wetham. I'm saying that correctly. Okay.
Sorry, I'm just gonna ask Manager Ha has the mic here. Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. That would be a boundary road shared with Oro. So any capital works on there would be a joint venture between us and Oro Medonte.
Thank you.
And on that note, that's a very good point that you brought up. So with the DOT software, we can update it for boundary roads. So if there are shared roads, which is very important, especially if ones like this come up, you want to know, right? So next slide, please. Okay, next slide. So when we went through the process of, so now that we've gone through so up to this point, we've assessed all of the roads. We've determined basically the PCI for all the roads. We've got that list going. Now, Dan and I had a discussion about, and Elise at the time, I believe too, about the types of treatments as well as the unit costs. So these are the unit costs that we used for the capital planning scenarios, and the types of treatments. And what was unique here is we had to go back and actually add a few different treatments. And this is where you may see things on this list for those of you who are familiar with the types of treatments that you may not do yet, or that maybe you do, but not as much. But these are when I was speaking to the technical capabilities of the region, of the area, of the township, these are all things that could be done here if needed or wanted. Okay, so it's important to do this because when we first ran through the scenarios, we didn't have some of these. And if you go back to that, so you don't have to go anywhere, Jen, I'm just speaking out loud. If you go back in your minds to that graph that goes down, if we don't have certain treatments at certain levels, it skips to the one next to it. So what it does is it actually creates a bit of a bigger need for what than you actually need. So it'll say, instead of doing a slurry seal, which is cheaper, it'll go to almost a major rehabilitation, which is more costly. So that drives the costs up. So this is why we can train ourselves to, and the program to think a little bit further and maybe bring new technologies to the township. Next slide, please. So I've talked a bit about, next slide. I've talked a bit about infrastructure solutions. So DOT is their software. This is, again, I've used it for many years. It's grown legs. When I first started using it, they only did roads. They now do the full suite of assets for a municipality. If that's interesting to you. But what's interesting about it is, in addition to the capital planning scenarios you can generate for your roads, you can also consider what they call, well, there's operation efficiency analysis, but there's also cross analysis. So what they'll do is they'll look at, if they'll develop your plan for your roads, and it'll cross over and look at your sewers and water mains. I pick on them because that's the biggest culprit to ripping up a new road, because nobody talked to each other. So they'll go through and now they'll say, well, this road might not need to be repaired yet, but we're going to be doing the water main soon, so let's move it up in the list. Okay, so again, it's not looking at just worst first. The other thing that I like about is the operation efficiency analysis. So the third from the bottom bullet. That's a unique one, a unique option when it comes to trying new scenarios or trying new treatments. What that does is it will, again, once it develops the capital plan, it will look at roads that could use a specific type of treatment. Let's say you don't do microsurfacing, so a preventive maintenance treatment. Well, you have a large township. So to do microsurfacing at all four corners is not really that cost effective for a contractor or for yourselves, because they're mobbing around all over the place. So what we might do is say, well, let's look at this specific subdivision. So some roads probably could use it, some might not. So what it'll do is say, well, they might not, but let's do it now anyway. So it's still a preventive maintenance treatment. But it will loop like roads together, so that, it's even for rehab. If you're doing a mill and overlay strategy, Whitby, I live in Whitby, and they did this in my neighborhood. Some of the roads needed a mill and overlay, some didn't, but they did all of them at one time because that was where the contractor was. So they got a bit of a better cost benefit analysis for that. But anyway, this is a way that we can, with this tool, we also look at socioeconomic factors. So again, not looking at just worst first, but where is the hospital? What are the roads around the hospital look like, or the fire stations? This can be factored in, and we did do this in another municipality, so that we could basically up the importance or the weighting behind roads in those areas to make sure that they were taken care of sooner rather than later. Next slide, please. And I'll try not to lose you here, but this is what I've been sort of talking about. So simple ranking, just on the graph, that's worst first. So that's us going out saying PCI 0 to 100, flipping it around, saying, here's your roads. Okay, that's pretty standard. A lot of people do that. Prioritization. So what that does is it's a multi-criteria analysis. So it's the same thing, but then it says, okay, so let's bring another level to that. So let's say, let's put more emphasis to our arterial roads, or maybe to our hot mix roads. It's just one thing. That's a multi-criteria analysis. True optimization, which is what this software does, is saying, okay, let's look at all those things, because those are the foundation of it. But then let's say, okay, but what if we want our road network, which is a 72 here, to look like a 75? How do we get there? Or an 80? Or what if I think one of the scenarios we ran was, what if we had more funding available? What would that look like? How could we spread that money around? And then again, on the left-hand side, the power, so that's the power of optimization. You can just factor more things, the socioeconomic impacts, like I said, the hospitals, police stations, you can add that in. Bullet point number 2 is the geo bundling. It's another way to call operation efficiency analysis. That's the one where I said you could basically take a technology and sort of look at it in an area. And then mixed asset optimization is if you also had other assets factored into the software as well. So say sewers and roads. Next slide, please. So these were the 3 scenarios that we considered. Again, this was with discussion with the town. This is not me saying this is what we should do. This is us running a quick scenario and saying, here's where you're at. What would you like to do? So maintain level of service. So that's a very common one. So what is it going to look like if we just hold it true, 72, right, for the next 10 years? These are all 10-year plans, I should point out. I don't know if I said that anymore in here, but these are all 10-year capital plans that we generated. The next one is the fixed budget scenario with current funding levels at 3.5 million, 3% increase over the 10-year period. And the third one was, well, what if we had an additional $1.5 million over a 10-year period with, again, 3% increase? $950,000 for maintenance was added to all of these, and that was fixed. So I just left it at the end there, but it was added to all of these values. Okay, so 3.5 is actually 4.45. Next slide, please. So this is what the output starts to look like. And I just left at the top, just kind of cut off, but what those scenarios were. The blue line represents at the bottom, sort of in the graph above, the blue line represents the maintain 72. And the other 2 lines are, the yellowish orange line, that's the 5 million. And then the red is the current level of funding. What's important when you look at these charts, and I stress this, is don't just look at one particular period. Look at the whole graph and how it changes. Okay, this is what the network condition would look like if we spent 3.5 million or 5 million over the course of 10 years. And I'll get into the other one as well, the maintain. But you'll notice that the one thing that probably jumps out at a lot of people is at year 2033, the bottom 2 are the same. They're both at a PCI of 81. So you're probably wondering, why am I spending more money, but I'm ending up at the same place? We're just going to put that one right on the table right now. It's important to look back to about 2029. That's where the third option with $5 million, that's where it peaks at 83. And then we're going to look back and see 83, 84, 82, 81. So I'm going to get into why that is the way it is. And this goes back to the types of treatments that are available and the health of the road network at these particular points in time. Next slide, please. And this did come out how I thought, really tiny. I wasn't sure, but it doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, this is, so the top graph, the top bar graph, or sorry, line graph is your local roads. The middle one is your collector roads, and the bottom one is your arterial roads. What you'll notice is that for all of them, the arterial roads are always peaking a little bit higher because there's more emphasis or weight being put on your arterial roads. Local roads are your residential streets. So the types of traffic they see are all light volume traffic. Just quickly put up my pavement design hat on. When we design roads, we do not design roads for light vehicles. So when I design roads for your local roads, I actually look at how many garbage trucks, recycling trucks, snow plows are on those roads. The light vehicles actually have no impact. They're very light. The damage ratio is very low. That's why arterial roads, which get all of those vehicles, plus buses, plus school buses or transit buses, and any other, especially in rural counties or in rural municipalities, we get quarries and pits. So you get rock hauling trucks and these other trucks. So there's a lot more damage on those roads, so they need to be built a little bit differently. So that's why the bottom one, if you'll notice, there's a bit more emphasis put on the arterial roads and then the collector roads as well, the connection roads. Next slide, please. Okay, so here's where the big difference is between the scenarios. This is the deficit projection in the backlog. So the dark blue line, the dark blue bar chart, that is if I maintain my 72. So I basically, that's all I want to do. I don't want to do anymore. You'll notice that as we go from year 2023 to 2033, the deficit is still just under 20 million. Okay. The light gray is option 2, current funding levels. So you can see if you were to optimize your strategy of how you're going to repair your roads, you can significantly reduce your deficit to below 5 million. And here's the big difference. If you added, this is where that extra 1.5 million comes in. If you added the extra 1.5 million to your budget, you almost would eliminate your deficit by 2031. That's part of the reason why when we look at that chart where they both end up at 81, what that means is, and I've highlighted it on the right with a box. Deficit is any of your roads that have a PCI of 55 or less. By year 2031, you would barely have any roads below 55. So what starts to happen is your budget is still high, but you don't have any roads that are in need of it, right? So you're doing a lot of preventive maintenance after those years. Now, take this with a grain of salt. I would never stand on this and say this is absolute. If you are a municipality that is going to be developing, adding more trucks, hauling trucks, more developments to your municipality, this will vary over the course of the 10-year period. You know, these are the things that factor. It's the things you can't consider. This is assuming that PCI graph that just goes from 100 to fail is consistent for all the roads, which it varies. But when you add things or change things, the biggest problem with roads is when they change function. When they start to get a road that was not a bus route now becomes a bus route. Now it's going to be damaged a lot sooner. This is why this happens, okay? But the deficit projection and the backlog projection, is actually the biggest difference between these scenarios. Okay, so this is just one thing I wanted to point out. That's the big reason why they end up at 81 together. We don't need the same treatments come year 2031 as we do 2033. Okay. Oh, right. So then this is the capital expenditure. The red lines represent, so scenario 1 again is your, oops, sorry, next slide, please, Jen. Yeah. The first one, scenario 1, again, that's your level of service. You can spend an average 3.3 million. You're probably wondering why, again, 2028 and roads like that, or the odd years are sort of lower than other years. And that's strictly because we're trying to maintain a 72. So what the tool is doing is it's saying, well, okay, I gotta put emphasis on these years, but I'm already at a 72. So I can focus more on preventive maintenance treatments in those other years. So they're cheaper. Okay, so that's why it kind of has that bell pattern to it. The scenario 2 again is current, so that's what you're doing. It's pretty consistent across the course. And again, scenario 3, that's why I've highlighted it. By 2031, that's where your deficit is basically nil. Okay, it's quite significant. Now, I don't actually think that would be true, but this is what our software tells us. So this is why we have engineering judgment and put it into play. Next slide, please. So yeah, just the wrap up slide. So again, I left out the 950,000 for O&M budget here, but basically if you went with scenario 1, your overall health is good. That's kind of the bottom line I wanted to leave with you now is your road network is good. I drove it myself too. It is in good shape. It's in satisfactory condition according to the rating scale, but I think it's in good shape myself. Scenario 1 will show you what you would need to do over a 10-year period to maintain it at the current state. But just I want you to keep in mind those few slides ago, if you do that, your backlog is going to be huge. And that's a bit of a pressure point for me. I think if you do that, you're really risking, something going wrong and then you have a catastrophic failure where you need to do a lot of roads at one time. And again, I don't know the development picture, but it's worth considering. Scenario 2 is basically what you're doing now. So it's a good amount of money that you're spending now. You will significantly reduce your deficit to just under, just about 4 million by the end of the 10-year period, roughly. And you're spending about 4 million a year. And then scenario 3, basically, yeah, if in the perfect world and if everything stayed true as it is today and it carried through for 10 years, you could eliminate your budget almost by year 8. But I won't tell you which one you do. That would be unfair. That is all I have. Next slide, please. So again, thank you for your time. I hope that made sense. And if not, I'm here for questions. And anyway,
Right, thank you. Thank you very much for that. Very beneficial. I did have this moved by Councillor Moore and seconded by Councillor Fisher. So that the presentation from our engineering limited regarding the 2023 road needs study be received. So at this time, council, we can have questions, comments. Open it up on the floor, and I do have Deputy Cabral.
Thank you, Mayor Cogman. I just two questions. One, when you're doing your projections, are you taking into account what, I guess, some version of what you anticipate the rate of inflation is going to be? That would be my first question. The second question would be on the dollar amounts on that last slide or the one before that you talked about the deficit at the end. I think it was 2 some odd million. Are you talking about the amount of money the township actually is spending, or are these figures that you are simply using as an illustration?
So
if you want to back up, it might be easier that way.
Jen, could you maybe go back to the slides? I'm not sure if we can pull them back up.
Might be one or two slides back.
Okay, yeah, let's go back one. Go back. We'll go back one. Is it not this one, right?
This one will suffice.
Okay.
Because here we're using scenario number 1, $2.7 million, and average annual capital expenditures. And my question would be, is scenario number 1 based on the actual dollars that the township is currently spending, or is this just an example going forward? And part 2 was, yes, thank you, Mayor Cogman, through you. I guess I'm just trying to look at now that we're looking at the $4 million that was spent. I know there was a number of projects in township that were done. As you said earlier on, there's a time when you're doing sewers where it might be appropriate to resurface roads. That actually did happen. So there were a number of projects that may not normally have been included in what you might consider capital expenditures as far as road works were concerned. And so I guess not necessarily for our speaker or presenter, but maybe for our financial side, you know, what was the dollar amount that was spent on road works in, say, 2023 and 2022, just to get an idea. I don't believe it was in the range of $4 million. So I just don't want to look forward based on a figure that in 2023 was a bit abnormal because of the work that was done specifically in Elmvale. A lot of resurfacing done in Elmvale in conjunction with the waterworks and wastewater works.
CEO Schmidt.
Thank you, Mayor Cogman. So to answer the Deputy Mayor's, through you to the Deputy Mayor, in the actual staff report that's provided this evening, Deputy Mayor, there is a graph on, or a table on page 3 that summarizes the expenditure or the budget that the township approved from, I guess, the last 5 years, so 2020 to 2024. So on average, over those years, it appears that the township has been spending just over $3 million. 2024, we're projected to spend just under $6 million. And specifically for 2023, it was just under 2.2 million, according to this chart.
Okay, just thank you. I appreciate that. It helps kind of wrap my head around the presenter's numbers and the graph too. Thanks.
Questions from other members of council? And I guess just for clarification, through to Manager Ha, when we were talking recently about gravel conversion, would we be utilizing this type of technology? Could we input that into this type of technology to have costing for council and what that would potentially cost? Manager Ha?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. I'll take a bit of a stab at this. I do believe that costing was included in the presentation with regards to upgrading gravel conversions. Certainly, the road needs study looked at our current road network as is, and didn't provide anything with regards to suggesting what could be upgraded. I think staff would look at bringing something back to council, per the direction that was provided, in the fall with regards to coming up with a plan for gravel conversions. And that's something that staff will, continue to work towards.
Thank you for that. Any other questions? Members of council? No, and I guess, Manager, how this is just another so when it does come to boundary roads, how does that work with municipalities? Just for my own curiosity, if we think that the road is at a 5 and we want to move forward, but Oro says, no, we don't want to spend the money there. How does that typically work?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Each of our boundary roads, we have, there are separate agreements that have been negotiated, well before my time, that spell out that process, for how you would work with the neighboring municipality for upgrades. I do believe in the 10-year capital currently, there is money set aside for Scarlet. We just need to now sit down and have those meetings with the neighboring municipality but cost sharing typically, and I'm just going by memory, are spelled out in those agreements, whether it's 50-50, whether it's, whatever, whether it's 60-40, or whether there's a section they do all of the capital works on, and we do we do another section of the road. It just all depends on the agreement.
Thank you for that. My question was more like, who gets to decide when the work? I understand there would be an agreement that says, yes, you do the summer maintenance, you do the winter maintenance, you do this percentage, but who gets to decide when the work takes place?
Some of that may be spelled out in the actual specific agreement. Don't quote me on the Scarlet Line one. But again, it's, I think in the case of Scarlet, like if we sat down with Oro, they would probably agree that road is failing.
Thank you for that. All right, and just double checking with Deputy Cabral. Okay, this time I'm not seeing any further questions, so that the presentation be received. All those in favor? And that has carried. And thank you very much. It was a great presentation. It was very informative. May I have a mover and seconder for the confirmation bylaw, please? I have Councillor Garwood and Councillor Moore, that the bylaw 2024-002 to confirm and adopt the proceedings of council at the special meeting held on January 17th, 2024, listed here and be signed and sealed by the mayor and clerk. All those in favor? That has carried. And our adjournment. May I have a mover and seconder to adjourn, please? I have Councillors Fisher and Thompson, that a special meeting of the Township of Springwater does now adjourn at 5:54 p.m. to meet again in regular session at 6:30 p.m. All those in favor? And that has carried.